This is the Literacy Mindset Podcast, where education leaders discuss identifying and removing phonological barriers with Mindplay's CEO, Jeff Pendleton.
All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. I am really excited for yet another episode of the Literacy Mindset today. And I have very special guests with me today, some longtime friends, people that I've known for a while, and I couldn't be more excited to have Ms. Kimberly Glass and Dr. Carrie Bredow on the show with me today. Let's see. Kim is the Director of Federal Programs for Springdale Public Schools, and Dr. Carrie Bredow is the Director of ESL Programming and Services. So, ladies, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we're really excited to have a conversation. I spent, obviously, some time when my children were very young, living in Northwest Arkansas. So it's fun to come back and have a conversation about what's going on, all the wonderful things that are happening there. But maybe let's just do a little bit of an intro. Kim, can you tell us just a little bit about you, and then we'll go to Carrie so that we have a little bit of context as to how you got to where you're at.
Okay, well, started out as a teacher, obviously, and a building administrator, and then went to the district level and multiple roles with curriculum assessment and federal programs. And then when I came to Springdale, it's just federal programs. And I say just federal programs. It encompasses a lot, and I do multiple federal programs. And I've been here for 17 years. I've been doing federal programs probably 27, 28 years.
Oh, that's excellent. We're going to get into some of those federal program uniquenesses. So I'm excited about that. And Carrie.
So I started my career, of course, as a teacher, and then transferred up to Springdale. I continued to be a teacher, and then worked as a teacher on special assignment to develop curriculum for kindergarten through fifth grade. Then transitioned into the administrator role, became an assistant principal, and then assistant director of ESL, and now the director. This is my fifth year as the director for ESL. Total of 18 years in Springdale, so it's definitely
Excellent.
home.
Yeah, that's a long time. So we have 17 and 18-year vets in the district on this. Lots of things we're going to be able to dive into. Springdale sits in the northwest corner of Arkansas. We call it a corner, I suppose. It's not exactly a square shape, but it's in the corner up there. And Kim, can you give us just a little detail on it? How big is the district? Just some of the makeup of the district, so we have some context.
So we're around 22,000 students. We've got the largest Marshallese population outside of the Marshall Islands. We're a minority district. And we're about just under 71% poverty. So you can see that there's a lot of challenges that we have. We have 29 schools. 26 of those are Title I funded.
Wow. Okay.
So that
we
is
get to dive
twice. In. Yeah, that's twice. When I got here, we had 10 Title I funded schools and 20 total schools. So you can tell the amount of growth in the number of years that we've been here.
Yeah, and it is. That part of Arkansas is just booming with growth, and it's exciting to see. But there are clearly some challenges, and we get to dive in, and we talk a lot about challenges to literacy, challenges to reading skill acquisition here. Okay, so help us understand a little bit. There's a large Marshallese population on that, but that's not the only ESL population that you have there. Carrie, kind of give us a little bit of makeup of the ESL population.
Sure. So like what Kimberly was talking about, we do definitely represent the highest Marshallese population outside of the Marshall Islands. And we're very thankful to be able to support all the students from the Marshall Islands and the Marshallese heritage as well. We also serve students from over 49 different languages currently. 60% of our students come from multilingual homes. The majority, over 85% of them, are Spanish-speaking homes. And so our students are learning English as an additional language. Many of them have had different experiences with multiple languages since birth. And so we want to make sure that we can grow from the assets that our students bring with all the different languages and linguistic experiences that they have, and support them in acquiring English not just conversationally, but specifically from an academic lens.
Got it. No, that makes sense. So when we talk about challenges of acquiring reading skills, right, which English reading skills are a bit challenging. I'm sure most languages are, and the explicit instruction required are. How many of your population on the ESL side have literacy skills in another language, and they're just transferring those skills over to English, or how many are acquiring literacy skills for the first time?
I would say, just based off of our past experiences, it's really kind of depends on each unique situation.
Okay.
For all of our students. And so what we try to focus most of our efforts on is identifying the foundational literacy skills that our students may possess in English by really getting to know our students, having them do a couple of different foundational assessments. And that really helps us to know where on their progression of learning they fall and how we can support them with the next steps.
That's excellent. So, what is it? Maybe just give us some broad, high level view of this. Are there certain models that you're using from English language acquisition and development? I know there's a lot of different things that kind of go to it, and state by state it can vary broadly. So maybe just give us a little bit of a description of what things look like in that. Let's call it elementary stage first here.
Sure. So from our students that are identified, we use the ULPA 21 assessment. That's our initial screener to identify if a student is in need of language services. From that point on, we really support the student kind of simultaneously, both with linguistics as well as with literacies. And so we look at where our students fall when it comes to their development of the English language based on the ULPA 21. And we place them in a dedicated English language development class that occurs every day. So they're able to explicitly understand the grammar structures of English and practice the English language and build their vocabulary in English. That is used as a foundational piece to bridge them into their everyday Tier 1 literacy practices that they have, where they're going to be receiving phonics instruction, practice phonemic awareness, and all of the other foundational principles that we know are best for the lower end of Scarborough's rope. And then we really tell all of our teachers, because we have so many multilingual students in our classrooms, that it's important to contextualize everything we do on the lower end of the foundational reading rope. So even though language comprehension is the top part of that rope, we also need to be aware of that and build context for our students so that they have those connections with their understanding of the English language as well as their other language experiences.
Okay, got it. So in the day, there is specific time that's set out where they are just in a language heavy environment, right, where they're working on it. And then there's other times where they're pushed into the regular classroom, and some extra services might be provided at that point in time. Okay, got it. What unique challenges do you find in kind of approaching it that way? And where do the challenges sit more? Do they sit more on the homeroom classroom teacher, or do they sit more on the support teacher that is kind of helping along the way? Maybe walk us through some of that.
Sure. So actually, our classroom teachers are the ones that do the flexible grouping of the students. And so,
okay. So that's exciting.
Yes, we have such a large population. We flex out our time so that all the students are just rearranged into different homeroom classes, where the grade level teachers are the ones that support their language for that particular portion of the day. And then they reshuffle back into their original homeroom groups based on the differentiated levels of language. So it's really been a benefit. Our teachers have been able to have the training specifically to understand language development, which of course bridges the gap throughout the rest of the day with their teaching practices and how they organize their lessons.
Right. Okay. And let's speak about the training for the teachers a little bit. Is that a very specific curriculum that's purchased that they followed? You guys developed that in-house? How does that work?
Yes, so we actually purchased the EL Achieve curriculum for the explicit language development portion. It is a kindergarten through 12th grade curriculum, and so we
Right.
purchased that for all of our grade levels. When we look at the kindergarten through 5th grade, we have the largest portion of our students identified in those grade levels. And so our schools rearrange their master schedules to allow for that flexible language time. So all students, regardless if they are served with the EL Achieve curriculum or an additional language curriculum, whether that is just regular English curriculum, like an ELA type curriculum, we call that their ELD time. And so all of the students are getting language where they need it in the acquisition of academic language. And so that's really been helpful because it meets our students where they are developmentally with acquiring English as an additional language, but it also supports the idea that all students are learning language at some point in time, and their development is just dependent upon where they currently are in their progress.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. How, Kim, is that a federally funded approach to this, or is that something you're able to incorporate into standard curriculum purchasing? How does that work?
So those that are not providing the ELD could be federally, like Title I as a supplemental position funded, and or we have a state categorical ESA fund that kind of mimics the life of Title I. So it is also supplemental. So it has to be, above and beyond. So as the students are divided up, other people are going in and providing, it's like an intervention. They need additional supports so that they would be providing the additional support piece.
Yeah. Okay. Well, one of the things that is always a bit challenging with literacy development in low socioeconomic settings is sort of family outreach, community outreach. And I think that we've talked a little bit about how essential that is when you add an ESL or another language component to that. So can you, one of you talk a little bit about just how you go about that? How do you think about community outreach, and what do you think helps drive success?
Well, one of the things that we've done years ago, we had a Toyota Literacy grant that helped us get started with family literacy program, where the parents come in and learn the language and learn alongside their kids in the classroom. And we use our Title I funds to help support that with paying for childcare so that the parents can come in and learn and not have to worry about the childcare. So that's been very successful. I know Carrie has other elements that support that as well through her programs.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead,
So,
Carrie.
like Kimberly was saying, with the family literacy program, we've been able to partner with an area Northwest Technical Institute, where they are the ones that actually have partnered with us, and they have the teachers, they're adult literacy teachers that come into our schools to help support the parent program. And then, like Kimberly was saying, we have the additional Title I funds to be used to support for any of the daycare expenses for the needs of any of our parents. It's been a very successful program. We weathered the storm of COVID and that COVID response and all of that. And now we've built back, and our parents really appreciate the opportunity to not only come into the classrooms and learn alongside their students, but then to have that additional parent time where they can be the learners of English as well and develop their own language skills.
That's excellent.
Found where when they go from school to another school, those parents are more ready and willing and able to have conversations where with that new school where they're not as timid as perhaps they were when they initially come to the first school because they've been through the program.
Got it. Yeah. So kind of priming the pump a little bit, get people out of their shell and have them have a chance to do that. Is that like one day a week, or what is that? What does the structure of that look like?
Yes, it's 2 days a week that they come into the schools. And then the additional days, we have the purchase of an online, well, actually Northwest Technical has purchased an additional online platform called Burlington Language. And the parents have access to that 24/7 to develop their English language skills outside of the classroom. So it's a technology component that enhances the learning and builds some flexibility for them to continue to grow in their own language skills.
Excellent. Yeah, actually, I thought about going down a technology route. So, is there other technology that's used inside of the classroom as well, or is it mostly paper and pencil? Paper is a great technology, just a little different than the digital one I think I'm referring to. But maybe walk us through what does it look like technologically inside the buildings?
So we generally use the technology as an additional enhancement for our students. Yep. Most of the time, it falls under the assessment lens when we're looking at technology. So it's a quick way for teachers to check in for understanding or check in to make sure where students' progress is. Our state this year has launched what they call the Atlas system, and it has multiple classroom-based assessments that are on the computer, as well as interim assessments that are on the computer. And that has been a useful tool for us to gather different pieces of data to support those next steps for students and really kind of placing them in interventions as necessary.
Some of the schools have purchased some additional software for, extra tutorial support, but it really is looking at reinforcing of what has been going on in the classroom, and then looking at, is the student performing, where they are in the classroom? Is that a support that's helping them go above where they are? And just looking at the data and how is that working? Because it's another way to reach the child. So it's really looking at enhancing what the teacher is doing, but not replacing. So it's not used as a, you go here and you learn this because we're over here and we're learning this, but it does help the teacher be able to reduce the size of the students, that they're working with while you have a group of kids that are working over here. Going back to the assessments that Carrie has mentioned there in our state assessment system, one of the things that we'll be able to look at and being able to identify, students to really keep an eye on, and perhaps even be a part of maybe where we start at the beginning of the year in looking at a group of students that we might need to intervene with, is that we know our accountability system in the future will be looking at, trying to move that bottom 25% of kids, and we'll have the ability to know who those students are right off of the bat when we get that data, and then really looking at that, looking how the kids performed the year before, looking at where those kids are within classrooms, and looking at the supports, that those supplemental support staff that we have in a building, and any softwares or those things. And from the very beginning, have a plan to be able to start working with them, and then moving in and out, depending on what students leave and what students come in. You've already got a good set database to begin working with, versus trying to build that from scratch at the beginning of a year.
Right. Okay. So just from making sure I'm understanding, is that something that the state is providing and you're excited about that? Or is that something that you guys went out and secured?
It's a part of our assessment, our accountability system. We'll have that information.
Got it. This is that Atlas thing.
We'll have to dig it out, but we'll have it.
Well, mind the
They're
data.
not going to give us the list, but
no,
we'll be able to get
that's
to
good.
it.
And I think that's one of the key things. I appreciate how you mentioned, we're not in the days where we used to send kids to a computer lab and that's where they were getting, some instruction, and we were like, oh, this is really neat. We have software. There's so many more involved and intricate ways that we can make a meaningful impact for teachers and students. But we also now have more data at our fingertips, which may mean it's harder for teachers to actually sift through the noise than before, relying on some of their intuition and instinct. So there's a lot of things to be figured out in the new technology data world we have.
Which is also great. We spend a good chunk in all of our schools of their Title I money on instructional facilitators, which is tremendous support for those buildings, because they work with the professional learning community, those CTMs is what we call those. And they bring data to the table. They look at the data that the teachers bring to the table, and they do that data analysis, and they talk about where the kids are doing well and where that there are some needs and what might be the next steps. And then they're in the classroom and they're modeling those strategies and they're coaching the teachers and they're doing all that. So you've got that well-rounded support system in place around what is happening at the moment. And then the next week we're doing it all again. We adjusted our school calendar a couple of years ago to have an early out on Wednesday so that they've got those time every Wednesday to meet together as teams. It's protected time. It's not taking time away from them and their planned time. It is protected time every Wednesday all year long for that to occur.
That's excellent. Yeah, I think carving out that space is an important role as an administrator to make sure the teachers have the space to be able to do that. As we think about intervention and the challenges of identifying risk and identifying challenges or hurdles, so many times we talk about the phonological hurdles that exist to reading success, but Carrie, when you look at your ESL population, how do you sift through the noise of, is this a language challenge? Is this actually a phonological gap? Is there dyslexia tendencies involved here? So just kind of walk us through, how do you guys walk down this assessment or diagnostic lens of, let's make sure we're getting every student what they need?
Sure. So thank you for that question, because it's one that we're continuously reflecting on and researching into. I know the last 2 years we've been really digging deeply into the research and what it says. I've been able to talk with those at our district level to really kind of hone in on what makes the most sense for our students, knowing that 60% of our students are coming from multilingual backgrounds. Whether they are qualifying for services or not, they are still learning, English as part of an additional academic language. And in addition to that, we have, like Kimberly had said, over 70% of our students that are also coming from low socioeconomic backgrounds. And so when we look at the doubling effect of that, we know that the research tells us that the vocabularies of students that come from low income families is not fully developed in comparison to those that come from other socioeconomic classes. And the other thing that we have actually noticed over time with the use of maybe too much screen time is that a lot of our students really are not able to develop as much vocabulary or interaction with oral language. And that seems to be a deficit area that we really have tuned into and are really focused on. One of the things, of course, with additional languages, we need to practice them in order to acquire them. But really, for all of our students, oral language is so important, because if we are not able to produce the sounds of the language, we're not able to make the connections. One thing that we have learned is that all of our brains are naturally mapped for language. And since our brains are naturally mapped for language, it's our biggest benefit to develop language with students prior to bridging the gap into literacy skills. And if we're able to really hone in on the oral language components of the English language and build context with pictures, labels, practicing those sounds, that in and of itself is really a good indicator for our students if they're progressing, if they're moving forward. And so luckily for us, we have enough of a population that we can do a comparison of like English learner peers. And if our students are not moving in that same trajectory and that same trend as their peers, then we do a little bit of a deeper dive into what are some of the possibilities here for this student. Is this something that is an additional language that they just need some more time developing language? Or is this truly, we need to put them in some type of a literacy intervention and support some of that foundational literacy they're maybe missing some of that additional literacy support. And so that's been a continuous process. And like Kimberly was saying earlier, that is another discussion that occurs during the CTMs. Those collaborative team meetings really facilitate conversations about which students that are progressing versus which that are maybe not progressing, And then what are we going to do about that? How are we going to support our students? And that's really led us to identifying who needs more help, who needs some additional language practice, but then what are some shifts we can make just in our everyday tier 1 instruction to enhance the practice of oral language so that our students are able to acquire those skills prior to the practice of literacy.
I like that.
You mentioned dyslexia. Our state has had a requirement of trying to, have they do have a statewide screener that they want us to use to identify markers of dyslexia. We don't identify dyslexia in and of itself. And then depending on how children do on that screener, then there's levels of intervention that is provided to those students over time. And then depending on how they do, shifts happen along that way. And so that's been happening in the state for a couple of years now.
Got it.
And just to build on what Kimberly was saying, from the intervention lens, we've learned through our research that the approach that we take in the intervention is what is the distinguishing factor for multilingual students that have characteristics of dyslexia versus students that have only been introduced to English. And so if we know the shifts in that intervention practice, that's going to be the difference maker for our students in acquiring not only the language, but also the literacy component.
Got it. Okay. So let's go up a few grades now. We've talked a little bit about K-5 for a minute. So is CTM, is that an option at 612 as well? Carved out K-12. Oh, beautiful. Okay. So CTM comes up, we've got teachers that say, I've got kids that are 7th graders that are reading at a 2nd grade level. I am a 7th grade ELA teacher. I'm not really skilled in teaching phonics or whatever identified barrier it might be to reading success of a foundational skill. What are some of the specific things that you can do or that you are doing right now?
Sure. So our district leadership, because they believe so much in the CTMs, a lot of those questions are built on the 4 questions of the PLC process. So what are our students learning? How do we know if they've learned it? And then what do we do if they haven't learned it or if they're already for an extension in the learning? And so that's really the key is, for example, like you were saying in your sample, if I have a 7th grade student who's presenting as possibly not reading on grade level, the first 3 questions I'm probably going to ask are, is the student new to English as an additional language?
The answer is very commonly yes in your district.
If that's the case, then we look at those trends. We look and see where are they in that natural trend of acquiring language, and try to bridge that gap as quickly as possible from their first language learning into an additional language learning. And that's all built around context. We make sure that we have pictures and visuals and vocabulary that's posted for students, lots of anchors for students so that they can build their context in the new language and then grow that from an understanding of language into what does that look like in print and how can I grow my understanding of reading from there. The other part that we probably would determine with our teachers would be what other literacy interventions are already available within the building. Like Kimberly was saying, we have additional components, different staff members that are available that can do pull-out for students. They can work on specifically building morphology understanding with students. They can work on phonics with their students. A lot of the times, especially at the 7th grade level and higher, we want to make sure that it's not what we would consider kindergarten level phonics. And so that would really be a focus for all of our interventionists who are already trained to meet those different needs. The third thing is we have just recently purchased a new online dyslexia characteristics platform, I guess is what you would say. Okay. And it's called Spire. And it's been great. We've seen a lot of growth for our students, and that's helpful. When you talk about a student who's 7th grade or higher, you also have the idea that they're becoming teenagers and they don't like the idea of being pulled out into a different classroom or, the different components of learning where they currently are. And so being able to just engage on a platform at a different point in time, maybe during some kind of an independent practice time, has been very helpful for those students as well.
Excellent. We do have someone at every building that has been trained and hired for a portion of the day to be able to provide services.
So if I'm a 7th grade ELA teacher, I've got someone I can lean on. There's an interventionist or someone in the building that is skilled and an expert in being able to help with that. Okay. All right. That's excellent. So what does science of reading look like in Arkansas? Is it the hottest thing off the press since who knows what came up, or is it kind of measured now at this point in time? It depends on which state I'm in. That it depends on the flavor of science of reading's emphasis.
I was going to say, we have been living in the world of science of reading for approximately 4 or 5 years now. Isn't that correct? Yeah. And those 4 years have been one where we had to lay the foundation for all teachers. So the state of Arkansas came forward with the plan that they would train all teachers in the science of reading at the awareness level to even know what it means. Excellent. So every licensed educator, kindergarten through 12th grade, has an awareness credential, which means they've gone through some online training or in-person training to help them identify the components of the science of reading and how it's important to explicitly support all of the foundational pieces for literacy. I think right now in our evolution and just natural progression of our understanding and deepening of our understanding, we're getting to the nuances now. We're looking at, what does this mean for a specific subpopulation? What does this mean to support in a universally accessible way? So those are all the new points that we're really kind of focusing on and developing our understanding. I know that the work we're doing currently across the district is focused on universal access for all of our students, regardless of their language background or any of their ability levels. We just want to make sure that our kids have access to that core Tier 1 instruction that is really founded in the principles of the science of reading. They
have a proficiency requirement for the elementary level and your special ed teachers, K-12. So there was an additional training requirement, and also, I hate to say mastery level, but your administrators had to, go through and make sure that they were seeing in the classroom the implementation of that. And all of that was required within a certain amount of time. And then new graduates from Arkansas universities are supposed to get that training within those universities. People coming from out of state are supposed to get that training prior. It's supposed to be a pre-licensure piece. Although there is some new legislation that has something to do with science of reading and that training still being offered, but I think that's like refresher pieces or like through evaluations. If across the district we saw a trend of something not being there, then we would offer that particular kind of training. But there is an annual training requirement that is still there for that. Love
that. I love hearing it. And I mean, it's one of those funny things where this isn't new science, right? This is science that's been around. But I'm really happy to hear.
It is, but there are people starting to question whether it is what it is, and
there always will be on that. But there's some good research practices that we all need to be applying, and I like having states put extra emphasis and fund that because it's an important part of it. Ladies, we could talk all day long. This has been fantastic. I love the conversation. There's so many unique idiosyncrasies in Springdale that you guys get to work through, and I think it challenges you to be better administrators and educators, and I appreciate that. Last question here for you is simply pull out your crystal ball. Give me your thoughts on, are there things we should watch for around the corner? Or anything that you think, no, this is not going to change. And that's a great way to predict the future because you can predict what's going to happen because it won't change. Any insights for the group or for the audience here?
I just think watching what's happening right now at the U.S. department level with the funding potential and or lack of funding potential in the federal programs, whether or not it comes across, they're not using block funding as a language anymore. Simplified funding is the language they're using to get around the block funding, because the block funding would require a congressional act of a different sort. And so I know that we're all hearing IDEA and Title I is pretty well coming forth in its existence as it is, but all of the others, we're hearing different things. If you look at the president's request, it's doing away with 3 and with migrant and with consolidating, 18 other programs. So that's really scary if you're sitting here in the federal world and trying to figure out what's going to happen in the future.
There is no predicting that future, right? But it is something to keep an eye on, trying to figure out. We have to advocate for the funds required. And a district like Springdale's a perfect example, right? There are unique challenges that exist that require dollars to make sure that we're doing right by every one of these kids.
Absolutely.
Carrie, what about you? Any crystal ball for us?
I would have to say that, unfortunately, since we can't tell what's going to happen ahead with funding, what I can say, and I apologize for my computer, what I can say is to really kind of focus on what we know about teaching and learning. And in my prediction of the future, I can see all of us as educators really understanding not only the science of reading, but the language underneath it, and how important academic language is as an accessibility to understanding any content area. It truly is a universal construct that's applicable to all content learning. And so if we as educators can really hone in our focus to language and how it supports all learning, I think we can benefit all of our students.
I love that. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, I wouldn't have expected anything other than excellent predictions and crystal balls of the future, or murky visions of the future. But let's keep advocating for the kids that we serve. Thank you so much for being on the show today, and hopefully we can do it again soon.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love to hear from you. Learn how we help students by identifying and removing phonological barriers at mindplay.com.